My youth pastor groomed vulnerable girls, then called us needy liars in court, so we destroyed his career. A year later, he showed up in another state counseling teens under a fake identity. I was 16 when Micah showed up at our church. He had one of those smiles people called magnetic. Tan skin, clean sneakers, arms always open for a hug. He'd just finished his youth ministry degree, and the women in the congregation called him a blessing. I was still recovering from my dad's death, still going to church 3 times a week, trying to feel something again. Micah noticed. He always noticed the girls who seemed just a little lost. He asked if I wanted to help lead youth nights, said I had a light in me. I cried after our first one-on-one, not because I was hurt, but because someone finally said I mattered. At first, it felt like therapy. He prayed with me. He asked deep questions. He said God gave him insight. Then he started texting me every night. Just encouragement at first, then compliments. Then, I couldn't sleep without hearing your voice. He never touched me in a way I could clearly call wrong, but the hugs lasted longer. His hand would linger when we prayed. He told me, God's love is intimate. What we have is special. I started pulling away once or twice, but he'd say, don't let the enemy plant doubt between us. When I finally told a close friend what was going on, she said I was exaggerating, that Micah loved everyone like that. I told our associate pastor. He looked heartbroken, then told me, we'll address this privately. Please don't talk to others. It would only cause division. Micah disappeared from the stage a week later. No explanation, just a new youth leader and a sermon on trials sent by the enemy. That same day, the pastor gave me a folded letter and said, this is a healing step between you, Micah, and God. It was an agreement of things I should reflect on, things like guarding my heart and not leading others into temptation. I signed it. I was 16. I didn't want to be a burden. The silence ate at me for years. I stayed in that church until I graduated, watched new girls get close to new leaders. I kept my head down, convinced myself I was the problem. Then 2 years later, a friend who'd moved to another state sent me a group photo. Look who's running the youth retreat this weekend. It was Micah, smiling, holding a Bible, surrounded by teenagers. I threw up. I hadn't said his name out loud in 2 years. The next week, I asked my therapist if I had any options. She helped me connect with a civil attorney who handled church abuse cases. He asked if I had any messages. I still had some emails, a few journal entries, but he said the most powerful thing would be witnesses. So I reached out to girls from my old youth group. Not all responded. One told me to stop stirring things up, but another, Rachel, did. She said she'd always wondered why I left. She thought she'd imagined the way Micah would single her out too. She'd been too scared to say anything. We talked for hours, compared stories. He'd called her his prayer partner too, told her to keep their meetings secret, even used the same phrases. This is sacred, between us and God. Together we found a third girl. She had a different story, but the same ending. We met with the lawyer and compiled everything we had. Emails, timelines, texts. The lawyer privately contacted the church where Micah now worked. At first they ignored it, then he sent over the binder. Less than a week later, Micah was gone from their staff page. No announcement, just like before. Then the letter came. A single envelope at my job. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot of a journal entry I had written in high school about Micah. On the back was a note, written in thick Sharpie. You really haven't learned when to shut your mouth. I panicked. I told Rachel and Kayla. They were scared too. Kayla had gotten a phone call with no caller ID, but no one spoke. There was just breathing. We filed a restraining order against Micah, but of course it didn't go through. There wasn't enough proof. But the lawyer said we had grounds for a civil case, either with emotional distress, abuse of power, and unlawful behavior by a spiritual authority. It wouldn't put him in jail, but it could make sure he couldn't just slide into another church again. Micah's lawyer tried to negotiate, offered a financial settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. We said no. During the deposition, he didn't apologize. He smirked, said we were all just needy girls who got attached. That's when Rachel snapped. She gave our lawyer a screenshot of his Facebook DM to her from 3 weeks earlier. Let's talk privately. I think we could work something out. He was obviously threatening her with a bribe. Micah's own attorney ended the session early. Eventually, the court ordered Micah to step away from any ministry or faith-based leadership indefinitely. He was also required to remove himself from youth spaces, camps, and any spiritual teaching platforms. His name wouldn't be listed in any formal registry, but his reach was cut off. I moved away, got a new job, started volunteering at a support group for survivors of spiritual coercion. I thought my life was just getting back to normal when, a few nights ago, I got an email from a girl I didn't know. The subject line just said, he's back. He's going by a new name now. I think he's after my little sister. And I realized this story might not be over yet. I couldn't keep going without telling the whole truth. The email came from someone named Lillian. She lived 3 states away. She said she found my name through a support forum. Her little sister Maria was 15 and had started going to this youth counseling nonprofit called New Horizons. The counselor there went by the name David, but Lillian swore it was Micah. Same height, same build, same way of talking. She'd attached a blurry photo from their website. My hands shook as I opened it. It was him. Different haircut, glasses now, but definitely him. I called Rachel immediately, then Kayla. We all agreed we had to do something. But what? The court order only covered his real name. If he was using a fake identity, that was a whole different problem. I spent the next day researching New Horizons. It looked legit on the surface. Nice website, testimonials from parents, partnerships with local schools. But when I dug deeper, things got weird. The nonprofit was only 6 months old. The board members were all from out of state, and David wasn't listed anywhere with credentials, just described as an experienced youth mentor. I emailed Lillian back, asked for more details. She said Maria had been going for about a month, started as group sessions, but David had recently suggested one-on-one meetings, said Maria had special potential. My stomach dropped. That's exactly how it started with me. Rachel found the nonprofit's tax filing online. The address was for a small office building. We decided to drive out there that weekend. It was a 4-hour trip. We practiced what we'd say the whole way, but when we got there, the office was mostly empty, just a reception desk and a few rooms. The receptionist said David only came in for appointments. She wouldn't give us his schedule. We left our contact information, said we were interested in volunteering. On the drive back, Kayla had an idea. What if we contacted the board directly? Tell them who David really was? It was risky, but we couldn't just wait around. I drafted the email that night, attached all our documentation from the civil case, explained that David was actually Micah, and he was violating a court order. I sent it to every board member I could find. Then we waited. 2 days later, I got a call from the board president, a woman named Doris. She sounded shocked, said they'd hired David based on strong recommendations, but they took allegations seriously. They were suspending him immediately pending investigation. I felt relief for about 5 5 minutes. Then Lillian texted me. David had called Maria directly, told her the nonprofit was going through changes, but he'd still meet with her privately if she wanted, as a friend. Maria's parents didn't know about any of this. Lillian was trying to figure out how to tell them without sounding crazy. I told her to document everything, save any texts or voicemails. We needed proof he was contacting minors outside official channels. That night, I got a Facebook message from an account with no profile picture. Just said, "You're making a mistake." I screenshot it immediately, showed it to our lawyer. He said it wasn't enough for police action, but it was definitely suspicious. The next day, things escalated. Rachel's employer got a call asking about her character, someone claiming to be doing a background check. Kayla's car tires were slashed, no cameras in her apartment parking lot. We were all getting paranoid, but we couldn't stop now. Lillian convinced Maria to stop responding to David's messages, but then Maria's friends started getting texts from him, asking about Maria, saying he was worried about her. Classic manipulation tactics. We decided to pivot. Instead of going through the nonprofit, we'd report him to the state licensing board, except there was a problem. Youth counselors didn't need licenses in that state. Anyone could call themselves a counselor. Our lawyer suggested we file a report with Child Protective Services, document that he was pursuing contact with minors outside professional boundaries. It wasn't criminal yet, but it would create a paper trail. I helped Lillian write up everything. Every text, every red flag, every attempt to meet Maria alone. We submitted it together. CPS said they'd investigate within 30 days. Meanwhile, New Horizons sent out an email to all families. Said David had resigned for personal reasons. They'd hired a new counselor. Everything would continue as normal. But we knew better. Micah wouldn't just disappear. He'd find another way. Another name. Another group of vulnerable kids. That's when I remembered something. During our civil case, we'd found out Micah had used multiple churches as references. What if he was doing the same thing now? I started calling churches in the area. Asked if they knew a David who worked with youth. Most said no. But one secretary paused. Said they'd had a David volunteer recently. Great with kids. But he'd left suddenly. No explanation. I asked when. It was right before he started at New Horizons. The pattern was clear. He'd build credibility somewhere. Use it to get the next position. Then move on before anyone caught on. We needed to break the cycle. But how do you stop someone who keeps changing their identity? Rachel had an idea. What if we tracked down his other references? Found out how many times he'd done this? We split up the work. I took the churches listed on his old resume. Rachel handled youth organizations. Kayla searched social media for any David matching his description. The first church I called was in Ohio. The secretary who answered sounded tired, like she'd been fielding calls all day. When I mentioned David's name, there was a long pause. "We don't have anyone by that name on staff," she said carefully. But when I described him, tall, soft-spoken, quoted scripture constantly, her tone changed. "Oh, you mean Michael? He left about 18 months ago. Rather suddenly, actually." Within a week, we'd found 3 more identities. Matthew at a summer camp 2 years ago. Joshua at an after-school program. Daniel at a community center. Always biblical names. Always working with teens. Always leaving suddenly. Each place had the same story. Great with kids at first. Then got too close to certain girls. Then vanished before anyone could act. No one had connected the dots because he kept moving states. The summer camp director I spoke with sounded haunted. "We should have done more," she said. But he was so good at making it seem like the girls were misinterpreting his kindness. I started a spreadsheet. Dates, locations, names he used. The pattern was terrifying. He'd stay somewhere for 3 to 6 months, build trust, target vulnerable girls, then disappear when things got suspicious. The spreadsheet grew to dozens of rows, color-coded by state, by type of organization, by the age of his victims. Looking at it made me physically ill. Lillian called me crying one night. Maria had admitted David tried to meet her at a park, said he needed to pray with her about something important, that God had given him a message specifically for her. Thank God Maria had felt weird about it and said no, but she'd been carrying the guilt, wondering if she'd disappointed God by refusing. We added it to our CPS report, but they were moving slowly. Said without physical harm or explicit threats, it was low priority. The caseworker sounded apologetic but firm. "We have kids in immediate physical danger," she explained. "Emotional manipulation is serious, but it goes to the back of the line." I wanted to scream. We were watching him circle these girls like prey. Then Kayla found something interesting. A youth counseling certification program in Arizona. Someone named David had enrolled 6 months ago. Never finished. But the timing lined up perfectly with when he'd started at New Horizons. She'd spent hours combing through online graduation lists, certification databases, anything that might give us another piece of the puzzle. I called the program, said I was verifying credentials for a job applicant. They couldn't give details, but they confirmed David had withdrawn suddenly. Something about inappropriate conduct during practicum. The administrator's voice got quiet when she said, "Inappropriate." I knew that tone. It was the same one everyone used when they talked about him. We had another piece, but still not enough to stop him. He was too careful. Never quite crossed the line into something clearly criminal. Just pushed boundaries until someone noticed. It was like he had a manual for staying just barely on the legal side of predatory behavior. The Facebook messages kept coming. Different accounts, but same vibe. "Stop digging. You'll regret this. Some things are better left alone." One particularly chilling message just said, "I know where you work." I reported each one. Facebook did nothing. Their automated responses said the messages didn't violate community standards. Rachel's job situation got worse. Her boss pulled her aside, said they'd gotten concerning emails about her stability. Anonymous, of course, but enough to make them worried. The emails claimed she was obsessed with a former colleague, making wild accusations, possibly having a mental breakdown. She had to explain everything, show our documentation. They believed her, but the damage was done. She could see it in how her coworkers looked at her now. I was grocery shopping when I saw him. Not David or Micah or whatever he called himself now, but definitely him. Same walk, same shoulders. He was 3 aisles over, pretending to read a cereal box, but I caught him glancing my way, just for a second. Our eyes met. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me, just turned and walked calmly toward the exit. My heart hammered. I abandoned my cart and left through the back exit. Called Rachel from my car. She said I was being paranoid, but I knew what I saw. He was watching me, testing how close he could get, showing me he could find me anywhere. That night I installed new locks, got a doorbell camera, told my roommate what was happening. She thought I was overreacting until I showed her everything. The spreadsheet, the messages, the pattern of behavior. Then she got scared too. Started double-checking the locks when I wasn't home. We developed a system. Text when leaving, text when arriving anywhere. Lillian had news. The CPS investigator finally contacted them, but get this. Someone had called in a complaint about about Lillian, said she was harassing a youth counselor, making false accusations, creating a hostile environment for her daughter. CPS had to investigate both claims now. The investigator apologized, said her hands were tied. Protocol was protocol. We were losing ground. He was better at this game than us, knew how to work the system, make us look like the crazy ones. I started doubting myself. Maybe we should just let it go. Maybe we were becoming the thing everyone said we were. Obsessed, paranoid, unable to move on. Then Maria sent Lillian a screenshot that changed everything. David had made a new Instagram, was messaging multiple girls from the nonprofit, all the same age, all with similar family situations, all getting special attention. The messages were carefully worded, nothing overtly inappropriate, but the pattern was unmistakable. One girl, Donna, had already met with him twice, at a coffee shop, not the office. Her parents thought it was official counseling. David told her not to mention the location change, said the office was being painted. He'd bought her drinks, asked about her dreams, told her she had a special calling that others wouldn't understand. We had him. This was clear violation of professional boundaries, meeting minors without parental knowledge, using social media to contact clients. The CPS investigator took it seriously this time, said this changed things, made it a pattern of concerning behavior rather than isolated incidents. But David must have sensed the walls closing in. The Instagram account disappeared. He stopped showing up at New Horizons, stopped returning calls. His phone went straight to voicemail, just vanished again, like smoke, like he'd never been there at all. I was so frustrated I could barely sleep. We'd gotten so close, had real evidence, and he just ran away to start over somewhere else. How many times would this cycle repeat? How many girls would have their trust shattered before someone stopped him? Then Doris from the nonprofit board called me, said they'd done more digging after David disappeared, found out he'd lied about basically everything. His references were fake, his background was fabricated, even his degree was from a diploma mill. They felt terrible. We're implementing new verification procedures immediately. She asked if we'd help them create better screening procedures, make sure this never happened again. It was something, I guess, but it didn't catch him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was already grooming his next victim somewhere. 2 weeks passed with no sign of him. I started to relax a little. Maybe he'd finally gotten scared enough to stop. Maybe we'd actually won something. But the relaxation felt wrong, like letting my guard down in a horror movie. Then Lillian forwarded me a Reddit post, someone asking for advice. Their daughter's new tutor was amazing, but something felt off. He was so interested in her personal life, so eager to meet outside of scheduled sessions. Always had reasons why the parent didn't need to stay during lessons. The tutor's name was Paul, but the description was dead on, right down to the way he quoted scripture and called certain girls special. He was already hunting again, already building trust with a new family who had no idea what they'd invited into their home. The post was from a town 2 hours away, close enough that he could have driven there easily, far enough that no one would connect him to David or Micah. He was learning, adapting his hunting ground to avoid detection. I commented on the post, tried to warn them without sounding insane, but my comment got deleted. The original poster messaged me, said I was scaring them with unfounded accusations, that I should be ashamed of trying to ruin a good man's reputation. The message stung. We were trying to help, and we looked like the villains. We needed a new strategy. Going to authorities wasn't working. Warning people directly wasn't working. He just kept slipping through cracks in the system. It was like trying to hold water in our hands. No matter how tightly we gripped, he leaked through our fingers. Rachel suggested we contact a journalist, someone who covered these kinds of stories. Maybe public exposure would stop him. But every reporter we reached out to wanted more proof, wanted criminal charges, wanted a clear villain story. One journalist actually said, without an arrest or a victim willing to go on record, there's no story here. As if the pattern itself wasn't story enough. We didn't have that. We had a pattern of creepy behavior that never quite crossed into obvious abuse. We had fake names and sudden disappearances. We had traumatized girls who were told they were overreacting. We had a predator who'd perfected the art of plausible deniability. I kept thinking about all the girls we didn't know about, all the ones who never spoke up, who blamed themselves, who were told to keep quiet for the greater good. How many Marias were out there, carrying guilt about refusing to meet him? How many Donnas, confused about why the special attention suddenly stopped? The Reddit post about Paul disappeared, either deleted by the poster or removed by mods, but I'd saved screenshots, added them to our growing file of evidence. The file was getting thick now, organized with tabs and cross-references. It looked like something a conspiracy theorist would create. Maybe that's what we were becoming. Kayla found Paul's new tutoring website, very professional, lots of stock photos, testimonials that sounded real but probably weren't, a contact form but no actual address. She ran the images through reverse search, all stock photos, all fake testimonials copied from other sites. We debated what to do, report him to another set of authorities who'd do nothing, try to warn more parents who wouldn't believe us. I felt so helpless, like we were shouting into the void while he continued his hunt undisturbed. Then I remembered something from our civil case. Micah had needed certain documents to work at churches, background checks, references, sometimes fingerprinting. What if Paul needed the same for tutoring? There had to be regulations, requirements, something we could use. I called around to tutoring companies, asked about their hiring process. Most required background checks, some required fingerprinting. All needed real identification and tax documents, the legitimate ones anyway, which Paul clearly wasn't. If Paul was working independently, he was probably avoiding all that. But if he was lying about credentials, that was fraud. Finally, something concrete we could report, something that didn't require proving intent to harm children. We gathered everything about Paul's tutoring business, the fake testimonials, the stock photos presented as real clients, the claims about education that didn't check out, sent it all to the state attorney general's office. The package was thick, professional, undeniable. They actually responded, said they'd investigate fraudulent business practices. It wasn't about the girls, but it was something. Maybe enough to shut him down, maybe enough to create a paper trail that would follow him to his next identity. While we waited, I kept monitoring online, looking for new posts about concerning youth workers, checking forums where parents asked for advice. It was exhausting. My search history would have looked insane to anyone who saw it, but I couldn't stop. Then Lillian called with news. Maria's friend Donna had finally told her parents about the coffee shop meetings. They were furious, filed a formal complaint with everyone they could think of. The father was a lawyer, and he wasn't playing around. Better yet, Donna had saved text messages, David telling her she was mature for her age, saying their conversations were private, asking about her home life, classic grooming tactics. Finally, evidence in writing. Finally, something undeniable. Her parents were considering pressing charges, not for anything physical, but for custodial custodial interference, meeting with their minor daughter without permission. It was a long shot, but it was something. The father said he didn't care if it stuck. He wanted it on record. I put them in touch with our lawyer. He said it was worth trying. Even if charges didn't stick, it would create more official documentation, make it harder for him to keep doing this, build the paper trail that might eventually trap him. The state attorney general's office moved surprisingly fast. Within a week, they'd issued a cease and desist to Paul's tutoring business. He was operating without proper licenses, making false claims about credentials. The order was public record, searchable, permanent. It wasn't an arrest, but it was public record. Something that would show up in searches, something that might make parents think twice before hiring him. A small victory, but we'd take it. Of course, he could just create another identity, another business, another way to access vulnerable kids, but we were making it harder, forcing him to work harder to hide. Each identity he burned was one less he could use. Rachel had been building a website, a place to document everything, not naming him directly, legal reasons, but describing the patterns, warning signs parents should watch for, red flags in youth workers. She'd taught herself web design just for this, spending nights and weekends perfecting it. We soft launched it in Survivor forums first. The response was overwhelming. So many people with similar stories, so many who'd been silenced or ignored. We weren't alone in this. The comment section became a support group, a validation that we weren't crazy. One woman, Alice, reached out with her own story. Different predator, same tactics. She'd spent years tracking him across states, warned every employer she could find. It was exhausting, but she couldn't stop. She understood the compulsion, the inability to let it go. She gave us tips: how to search business registrations, how to track name changes, how to document everything in ways authorities couldn't ignore. We were building a network, learning from each other's battles. Then came the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. Donna's parents had hired a private investigator, someone who specialized in these cases. He'd found something we'd missed, something that changed everything. Paul wasn't just using fake names. He was using a deceased person's social security number. That was federal identity theft. Finally, something law enforcement had to take seriously. The investigator had connections, knew which agencies to contact, how to present the evidence. The investigator shared his findings with us. We added it to our ever-growing case file, sent updated reports to every agency we could think of. Someone had to listen now. The FBI got involved. Identity theft across state lines was their jurisdiction. But Micah, or David, or Paul, or whoever he was now, must have sensed the net closing. The tutoring website went dark. The phone number disconnected. He was running again. But this time, he was running from federal charges. This time felt different, though. We had too much on him. Too many people watching. Too many parents who'd been warned. He couldn't just pop up in another town without someone noticing. The network we'd built was growing, spreading information faster than he could run. Still, I checked Reddit obsessively, scoured parenting forums, searched for any mention of suspicious youth workers. It was taking over my life, but I couldn't stop. My laptop was always open, always searching. Then late one night, I found it. A post in a small town Facebook group. Does anyone know Paul? He offered to mentor my son for free. Seems too good to be true. My stomach dropped. He was still out there, still hunting. My heart sank. He was at it again. But this time, targeting boys, changing his pattern to avoid detection. We'd been so focused on protecting girls, we'd missed this possibility. He was adapting faster than we could track. I screenshot everything, messaged the poster privately. This time, I led with the identity theft, said I was part of a fraud investigation, asked them to be careful, used official language, sounded legitimate rather than paranoid. They actually listened, said they'd had a weird feeling anyway, thanked me for the warning. One kid saved, but how many others were we missing? How many parents were ignoring their instincts because he seemed so godly? We updated our website, made it clear this wasn't just about girls. These predators adapted, changed tactics. Parents needed to be vigilant with all their children. The warning signs were the same: special attention, private meetings, secrecy. The network Alice had introduced us to grew. Former victims, concerned parents, a few youth workers who'd seen suspicious colleagues. We were building something, a watchdog group that could move faster than official channels, but it was taking a toll. I wasn't sleeping well, jumping at shadows, seeing him in every crowd. My therapist said I was hypervigilant, that this crusade was re-traumatizing me. She wasn't wrong. I'd check my locks 3 times before bed, peek through curtains at every car that passed. She wasn't wrong, but I couldn't stop. Not when I knew he was still out there, still hunting, still using God and trust and authority to hurt kids. The knowledge sat in my chest like a weight. Rachel was struggling too. The harassment at her job had stopped, but she was paranoid. Installed cameras everywhere, carried pepper spray. This was consuming all of us. We'd become the thing we were fighting. Shadows, always watching, always afraid. Kayla was the one who suggested we take a break, just a week. Step back, breathe. Remember we had lives outside this fight. It felt wrong, but we agreed. We needed to remember who we were before this consumed us. I lasted 3 days. Then I was back online, searching for any sign of him. The compulsion was too strong. The fear that we'd miss something, that another girl would get hurt because we took a vacation. The guilt of rest was worse than the exhaustion of vigilance. That's when I found the Reddit post that changed everything. Someone asking for advice about a youth counselor who called himself God's armor, said only special kids could understand his mission. The language was different, more extreme, but something felt familiar. The details were all different. New name, new approach, new location. But something about it made my skin crawl. The grandiosity, the religious manipulation, the focus on special chosen ones. It was like he'd dropped all pretense of subtlety. I reached out to the poster, carefully this time. Just said I worked with youth safety. Asked for more details about their concerns. They responded immediately. Seemed relieved someone was taking them seriously. God's armor was running private youth groups. Parents paid big money for his spiritual guidance. He promised to prepare kids for spiritual warfare. Said he had visions about their futures. It was a whole different level of manipulation. Apocalyptic, urgent, us versus them. It sounded nothing like Micah's old approach. But predators evolved. Maybe he'd realized being subtle wasn't working anymore. Maybe he'd gone full cult leader instead. The soft-spoken youth counselor had become a fire and brimstone prophet. I shared it with Rachel and Kayla. We agreed it was worth investigating. Even if it wasn't him, this God's armor person sounded dangerous. Kids didn't need spiritual warfare training. They needed safety, stability, adults they could trust. We started researching. Found a website full of testimonials about transformed children. Parents gushing about their kids' new confidence. Photos of group sessions that looked more like boot camp than counseling. Kids in matching t-shirts. Hands raised in prayer or surrender. Then I spotted something in one photo. A hand hand gesture he was making while praying over kids. The same weird way Micah used to hold his hands. Thumb tucked under, fingers spread. It was him. After everything, all our work, all our warnings, he'd just transformed into something worse. Something that parents would pay to let near their children. I called the others immediately. We had a conference call that night. Everyone agreed the hand gesture was too specific to be coincidence. But God's armor was operating totally differently. He had an LLC, a board of directors, actual employees. This wasn't some guy sneaking around anymore. Rachel found his corporate filings. The business was registered in Nevada. The board members were all from different states. None of them seemed to exist online outside this organization. Probably fake names or people he'd convinced to front for him. We needed proof it was really him. The photo wasn't enough. But how do you prove someone with a fake identity is actually someone else with a different fake identity? It felt like chasing smoke with our bare hands. Then Kayla had a brilliant idea. Remember how the FBI was investigating Paul for identity theft? What if we sent them the God's armor info? Let them connect the dots. They had resources we didn't. Fingerprint databases, facial recognition, actual authority. I contacted the agent who'd reached out about Paul, left a voicemail saying we might have found him under another identity, sent an email with everything we'd found about God's armor. Then we waited and waited. FBI time moves different than regular time. Meanwhile, I kept monitoring the God's armor situation. More parents were signing up their kids. The website advertised summer intensive programs, weekend retreats, private sessions for spiritually gifted youth. All the old red flags wrapped in new packaging. One parent had posted a review that made my blood run cold. Said their daughter came back from a session talking about her special purpose. How God's armor was the only one who understood her calling. How her parents wouldn't understand the things they discussed. Classic isolation tactics. I reached out to that parent privately. Sent a careful message about concerning patterns I'd noticed. They responded defensively at first. Said I didn't understand the spiritual warfare their family faced. But I kept pushing, gently, sharing resources about religious manipulation. It took 3 more messages before they started listening. Their daughter had become secretive, withdrawn from friends, only wanted to talk to God's armor. The parent was starting to worry but didn't want to seem unsupportive of their daughter's faith. I gave them the website Rachel had built, told them to look for the warning signs. They went quiet for a few days, then came back with questions, lots of questions. The spell was starting to break. They pulled their daughter from the program, said she fought them hard, accused them of blocking God's plan. It was heartbreaking but necessary. 1 more kid safe, but dozens more were still enrolled. The FBI agent finally called back, said they were investigating but couldn't share details, asked if we had any additional information. I could tell from his tone that they were taking it seriously. Something in our report had triggered real interest. 2 weeks later, Lillian texted our group chat, just a link to a news article. Religious youth organization under federal investigation. My hands shook as I clicked it. The article was vague but mentioned financial fraud and identity concerns. God's armor had disappeared. The organization's website showed a maintenance message. Parents were demanding refunds. Employees were confused. The whole thing had collapsed overnight, but we knew he'd just vanished again. I felt defeated. We'd disrupted him but not caught him. He was probably already planning his next identity, his next group of victims. The cycle would continue. I threw my laptop across the room in frustration, but then something unexpected happened. One of God's armor's employees reached out to us. A woman named Robin who'd handled scheduling. She was angry. He'd left them all hanging. Paychecks bounced. Parents screaming at her for answers she didn't have. Robin had noticed things too. How he never let anyone see his actual credentials. How he paid everything in cash. How he had multiple phones. She'd kept copies of everything, thinking she might need it for unemployment claims. Now she wanted revenge. She sent us a gold mine, employment documents with his signatures, bank routing numbers, even a photo of his actual driver's license that he'd had to show for some paperwork. The name on it wasn't Paul or David or Micah. It was Gary Hendricks. We ran the name immediately. Found an obituary from 5 years ago. Gary had died in another state, just like the investigator had found with Paul. He was using dead people's identities, but now we had the pattern. We could predict his next move. I sent everything to the FBI agent. This time he called back within hours. They'd been building a case. Our information filled in crucial gaps. They were ready to move. He couldn't give details but said we should watch the news. 3 days later, it happened. Federal agents arrested a man at a bus station 2 states over. He'd been trying to buy a ticket with cash, had multiple IDs on him. The arrest report mentioned an ongoing investigation into identity theft and fraud spanning multiple states. They didn't release his photo immediately, but the description matched. The charges were all financial, nothing about the kids, but it was enough to hold him, enough to dig deeper. The agent called to thank us, said we'd been instrumental. The story hit Reddit before mainstream news. Someone posted about their youth counselor being arrested, asking if anyone else had experiences with him. The comments exploded. Story after story from people we'd never found. Girls and boys from across the country. Our website traffic went insane. Thousands of people reading the warning signs, sharing their own stories. We'd accidentally created something bigger than catching one predator. We'd built a community of survivors finding their voices. Rachel and Kayla and I met in person for the first time in months. Just sat in Rachel's apartment staring at our phones as the stories poured in. We'd done it, not the way we'd planned, but we'd stopped him. The FBI reached out again, wanted our full documentation, every identity we'd tracked, every pattern we'd noticed. They were building a bigger case. The financial charges were just the beginning. Our evidence would help establish the pattern of targeting minors. It took months for the full story to come out. He'd been doing this for over a decade, dozens of identities, hundreds of victims. The FBI said our documentation had been crucial. We'd connected dots they couldn't see, shown patterns they'd missed. He tried to plea bargain, claimed it was all misunderstandings, that he was just trying to help troubled youth. But there were too many stories now, too many people speaking up. The dam had broken. His lawyer dropped him when more evidence surfaced. I testified at a preliminary hearing, not about what he'd done to me. That was past statute of limitations, but about the pattern we'd documented, how we'd tracked him across identities. The judge listened carefully, took notes, asked pointed questions. Seeing him in court was surreal. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. He kept his eyes down the whole time. No magnetic smile, no confident presence, just a middle-aged man in a jail jumpsuit facing consequences for the first time. He got 15 years, not for what he did to us, but for the identity theft, fraud, and new charges related to the more recent victims. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. He couldn't hurt anyone from federal prison. The day after sentencing, our website got a message. A girl named Sarah Sarah, saying she'd been in his youth group years ago. She'd never told anyone what happened, but seeing him arrested gave her courage. She wanted to share her story, help other survivors. We added a forum to the website, a safe place for survivors to connect, share resources, find therapists who understood religious trauma. It grew beyond anything we'd imagined, became a resource for parents, youth workers, anyone trying to protect kids. I still check Reddit sometimes, still monitor for concerning posts, but it's different now. Not the obsessive searching that consumed me, just keeping an eye out, being part of the network of people who watch for predators. Rachel went back to school, became a social worker specializing in religious trauma. Kayla started training youth organizations on protection policies. We'd turned our trauma into purpose, found ways to help without losing ourselves. Lillian's sister Maria is doing well, went to therapy, processed what happened. She volunteers with us sometimes, shares her story with parents who think it could never happen to their kid, shows them how subtle the manipulation can be. The other survivors we'd found along the way stayed in touch. We had reunions sometimes, not sad gatherings, but celebrations. We'd survived, we'd fought back, we'd won. Together, we'd done what none of us could do alone. Last week, I got an email that made me smile, a parent thanking us, said our website had helped them recognize warning signs in their kid's coach. They'd acted fast, reported it, protected not just their kid, but others. The cycle of silence was breaking. Sometimes I think about all the kids we couldn't help, the ones who never spoke up, who blamed themselves, who were told to stay quiet. But I can't save everyone. I can just do my part. Share my story, watch for warning signs, help where I can. The investigation uncovered something else too. He'd had help. People who'd covered for him, given fake references, helped him disappear. Some faced charges too. The network that protected him was finally being dismantled. One was a pastor from my old church. He'd known, had helped Micah get that first job after leaving our church, claimed he believed in redemption. But really, he just didn't want scandal. He lost his position. His church issued apologies. Too little, too late, but something. I don't go to church anymore. Can't handle the triggers. But I found faith in other places, in the strength of survivors, in the power of truth, in the community of people who refuse to stay silent. That's my congregation now. The Reddit post that started this final chapter is still up. Thousands of comments now. People sharing stories, resources, hope. It became bigger than catching one predator. It became proof that we're not alone, that our voices matter, that together we're unstoppable. Sometimes new people find the post, ask if it's real, if we really caught him, if justice is possible, and we tell them yes. It's messy and imperfect and exhausting, but yes, you can fight back, you can win, you just can't do it alone. I'm writing this update because people keep asking what happened, how it ended, if we're okay, and I want them to know we are. We're more than okay. We're free. He's locked up. Kids are safer, and we found our voices in the process. Now, to anyone reading this who sees themselves in our story, know this. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Trust your instincts. Speak up. Find others who understand. Don't let anyone silence you. Your story matters. Your safety matters. You matter. And to any predator reading this, thinking they're too smart to get caught, we're watching. We're connected. We're not scared little girls anymore. We're a network of survivors who know your tricks, and we'll find you, just like we found him.